The United States Air Force had ramped up flyovers of B-1B Lancer bombers over waters near China amid growing bitterness between the two powers on all fronts. The flyovers came with increased military operations by both the U.S. Navy and Air Force in the South China Sea, East China Sea, the Taiwan Strait and the Yellow Sea this year, while China's military observers warned of rising risks of military conflict between the two countries. In the latest announcement, the U.S. Pacific Air Forces said on Tuesday that B-1 bombers conducted a mission in the South China Sea, just days after training with the U.S. Navy near Hawaii, demonstrating the credibility of U.S. Air Forces to address a diverse and uncertain security environment. Beijing and Washington remain locked in a war of words over each other's handling of the COVID-19 crisis and the origin of the virus that has killed more than 324,000 people and infected nearly 5 million people around the world. The blame game has caused rifts in an already strained relationship, affecting a range of activities, including journalism, trade, technology and the military. The U.S. Air Force deployed 4 B-1B bombers and about 200 airmen from Texas to the Andersen Air Force Base in Guam on May 1st, saying the mission was to support Pacific Air Forces and to conduct training and operations with allies and partners. Li Ji, a military specialist based in Beijing, said the deployments showed that the U.S. was trying to keep up strategic deterrence, with the U.S. Air Force conducting 11 flights in March and 13 in April over the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. Obviously, decision-makers in the Pentagon are trying to use the bombers as a new tool in its strategic deterrence against China. We will see intensified B-1 interference into airspace over the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea in May, Li said. He noted that soon after the dispatch to Guam, 2 B-1B bombers flew over the East China Sea and also flew over the waters off the coast of northeast Taiwan on May 6, which he said was an indication to Taiwan that the U.S. had not given up its military influence in the region. The U.S. Air Force sent 2 B-1B Lancers for a 32-hour round-trip flight over the South China Sea on April 29th. It rotated B-1, B-2 and B-52 bombers, the 3 strategic bombers in the U.S. Air Force fleet, among other military aircraft, to fly over the contested waters near China. The Chinese Navy started an 11-week military exercise in waters off the northern port city of Dongshan in the Yellow Sea. The U.S. sent a warship through the Taiwan Strait on the same day, marking the 6th passage of the strait by a U.S. Navy vessel this year. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said on Wednesday that the U.S. Navy had conducted a mine warfare training exercise in the East China Sea. China is also on the way to upgrade its military strength. It put 2 new upgraded nuclear-powered strategic submarines into service last month, and it is also considering the launch of a new generation of strategic bomber, the Xi'an H-20 supersonic stealth bomber, possibly within this year, as previously reported by the South China Morning Post. Zhu Feng, director of international studies at Nanjing University, said tensions in the South China Sea had become increasingly tense and turbulent in the past 3 months and were closely linked to political and diplomatic conflict between the two countries. The U.S. military is concerned that the coronavirus may offer a window of opportunity for China to increase military presence in the South China Sea, or even increase the odds of a military operation against Taiwan. He said China's tough response may further fuel the Trump administration's push to contain China on other fronts, pressing ahead with the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, an important tactic for the U.S. to draw allies in the region over to its side and further alienate China, Zhu said. Song Xiaoping, a Hong Kong-based military affairs commentator, said the frequent flyovers of B-1 and B-52 jets were not only to display the U.S. military presence but were exercises looking ahead to potential battles of the future. The B-1, replacing B-52, needs to fly around the waters to know the battlefield conditions well, He said China and the US are entering into a full-fledged competition and the situation is grimmer than the US-Soviet Union Cold War. Risks of military conflict cannot be ruled out in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. And they are increasing, Song said. The increasing frequency of US bomber flights come amid simmering tensions between the world's economic superpowers in the South China Sea, the East China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, as well as escalating back-and-forth rhetoric between Washington and Beijing over the coronavirus pandemic, which President Trump said Wednesday was the result of Chinese incompetence. The US Air Force deployed a squadron of 4 B-1Bs and 200 airmen to Guam on May 1st. And proceeded to fly them into areas near Chinese waters and in sea areas in the South China Sea claimed by Beijing, as well as waters off Taiwan. Last week, Indo-Pacific Command spokesman CPT Michael Kafka accused China of attempting to use the regional focus on COVID to assertively advance its own interests in the region, and pledged the U.S. would continue its freedom of navigation missions in the area. General Timothy Ray, commander of the Air Force's Global Strike Command, warns Beijing that the U.S. has the capability and capacity to provide long-range fire anywhere, anytime and can bring overwhelming firepower, even during the pandemic, with his remarks coming as the U.S. demonstrated its global reach by deploying nuclear-capable B-52 Stratofortress and B-2 Spirit bombers on simultaneous missions to Europe and the Pacific last week. Amid Chinese Navy drilling and plans to beef up naval and air forces in the Pacific, India expressed concerns that Beijing may be building South China Sea-style artificial islands in the Maldives. Australia, meanwhile, had raised concerns of its own over China's growing military presence in the South China Sea and Beijing's tensions with Washington. The Department of Defense has said that US adversaries are trying to take advantage of the global situation, but has also stressed that the U.S. military remains ready to meet that challenge and defend its interests. The U.S. military has increasingly sought to make its presence known in the South China Sea in the larger Indo-Pacific region, especially after the coronavirus sidelined the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt. The coronavirus originated in China, and both countries have blamed each other, even going so far as to promote conspiracy theories in recent months. US Navy ships have conducted patrols and freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, as well as Taiwan Strait transits, and US Air Force bombers have carried out patrols in the region. US operations have continued since Navy vessels have conducted 3 freedom of navigation operations challenging China's territorial claims to the Paracel and Spratly Islands. US ships carried out multiple presence operations near a South China Sea standoff. And Navy warships, including the large amphibious assault ship USS America, have conducted joint drills with other nations, and Air Force B-1B Lancers have carried out 2 strategic bomber patrols following a recent freedom of navigation operation. Senior Carl Lee Huerman, a spokesman for the People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command, said the U.S. should focus on fighting COVID-19 rather than conducting military operations. Tensions in the South China Sea, where the U.S. and Chinese militaries have had a number of unpleasant interactions over the years, come as the U.S. and China spar over the COVID-19 outbreak that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives worldwide. The Trump administration, which has come under a lot of scrutiny for its handling of the coronavirus at home, has repeatedly criticized China's missteps, which the U.S. says caused a troubling problem that began in China and evolved into a global crisis.